It's 5:30. I will call the work session to order. Up first, we have the classification and compensation study overview. Mr. Merrick.
Yep. Mayor, would you just for the record, acknowledge Eric?
Sorry.
Remote location.
Yes. Do I need to do anything special or just... So joining us this evening is Eric Hirschman. He is joining us remotely. That's why we're in here tonight for the work session.
Yep.
And he is joining us remotely via Zoom.
Yep. And I know we won't have any votes, but just for the regular meeting, we'll have to do roll call votes for that as well. So,
okay. Welcome, Eric.
Just testing audio, Eric. Can you say something?
Yes, I can hear everyone.
All right. Great.
Perfect.
So happy to welcome and introduce Leah Davis with ABDO. She's going to be kind of leading our classification and compensation study venture. The city last did a complete study in 2013 and then did kind of like a mini update to that in, I think it was 2018. But it's a fairly complex process and a lot of kind of processes, models, et cetera. And so rather than just say, showing it to you when you have the completed product, I invited Leah to come in and kind of give you a bird's eye view of the proposal from ABDO, what you should expect for processes, and then give the council some time to ask questions that you think might be helpful as you go through the process yourself. So with that, Leah, welcome.
Super. And Eric, as Leah's coming up here, if you have any audio issues or if people are hard to hear, I'll try to keep an eye on you and just wave madly if you need something reiterated or anything like that.
I can do that.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Welcome.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Council. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, right? So I've put together just a few high-level slides, and there was some materials I think that maybe went out end of last week that kind of at least primed you a little bit of. It's not really just a market study. There's a lot of components that go into a well-done compensation study. And actually, if your last study was help.
Oh, sorry.
Can I get the microphone closer to you? Thank you.
I didn't have it on, Eric. Is it better now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. It's like unmuting in Zoom. Okay, so so we'll kind of go through a high overview. Eric, I was saying hopefully you had a chance to read through some of just that quick article that gives you a bit of a primer. But if your last study was done in 2013, you're probably a good example of how a well-done study can sort of sustain itself for, usually we say 10 years at a max, particularly in a city like Carver where you're growing rapidly. There's a lot of things changing in the city. So and we'll kind of go through what the study will sort of provide you with. And the goal is always that whatever we do in this next round will sustain you for another rapidly growing, probably 5 to 7 years is probably your good estimate that you should be able to rely on. All right, so very high level. Am I hitting the wrong button, Vicki? We tested this, didn't we?
It's not just you. We kind of go through this every week.
It's okay. As long as you don't care, I'm good.
Yeah.
But maybe can we advance the slide, please? Great. I'll give you just some quick introductions to the individuals from my team working on the study. We'll go just high level again and sort of recap that article you were provided with, some of those broader benefits that I think a lot of times cities and sometimes even study providers forget to sort of highlight. We'll talk a little bit about our ABDO process and methodology, particularly the position scoring methodology that we use. And kind of show you what the project phases will look like from start to finish. But again, this is just a work session, so interrupt, ask questions. I'm completely fine with going very casual. So it's your project, so we'll go through that. One of the other things I'll kind of hope to break down with you is sort of what is the project and what is it not, right? Because I think that's where a lot of cities and employees can get themselves, it can cause a little heartburn sometimes if we don't level set sort of what to expect out of the study. So, all right, next one, please. All right, so there's a team of 3 from my team that'll be assigned to the City of Carver's study if we're engaged to do so. I am a partner at ABDO. I'm a CPA, so my background was in public accounting, but I've done human resources and payroll consulting as a sort of specialization area since 2008. So been with ABDO since 2016. operated my own HR and consulting firm for several years prior to that, and we worked collaboratively. So was excited to join the firm in 2016. Michael Mooney is a senior associate on my team with a specialization in compensation and benefits. So he ends up doing a lot of the analytic heavy lifting. And then Brittany Bauer is a senior associate on our HR team with a lot of HR background and technology background. So she tends to do a lot of the job description reviews, the position scoring, and we all just sort of partner together to get all the pieces to come together. So, all right. Okay, so what do you get out of a study? And we'll kind of go through in the phases as well. We probably won't have to go through as much of the phases because we'll talk about it here, but updated job descriptions seem really boring, but they're actually a pretty big deal, both from a regulatory perspective, in addition to the role they play in a compensation study. So that's actually a large portion of the project is spent on the job descriptions because they're time intensive and they require a lot of collaboration with employees, department leaders, and leadership to make sure we get them right? So that's a big piece of the study, and getting those current for all employees at the same point in time. Even from a disability accommodation, job posting, they're used for a lot of different reasons within an HR department. So they're great tools to have post-study. Position scoring is something that's required under the Minnesota pay equity regulation. So in Minnesota, every position is required to be given a score that represents the position's sort of overall impact and influence in the organization, right? We'll talk a little bit about what those scores can mean, but, and you can go back a slide, Vicki. Sorry. But you have to have a score because it's used for pay equity reporting, because what the state says is, and this happens every 3 years, the city's required to report every position and their pay and their score and whether that's a female-dominated position, a male-dominated position, or a non-binary dominated position. So, for instance, if you have a predominantly male-dominated position, let's pick a public works position, for example, and that is similarly scored to a female-dominated position. There are more females in that role than males. If those are similarly scored, the state says they should be similarly paid. And so that's sort of the statistical analysis that sort of happens with those scores. That's really the reason cities have scores, but they're also used to sort of establish not a hierarchy is not the right word, but you can sort of put the positions in ascending or descending order based on level of impact, influence, independent decision making, those types of things, and then that's used to sort of develop the grade ranges for positions, because in theory, wage should correlate to score.
Leah, can you kind of drill down on this one piece? So the cities use what's called the SAFES method.
Yes.
That was kind of created by Baker Tilly or
Yep.
Springstead at the time. And so can you just explain there are multiple ways to do that and how that might integrate into our process, since we're not using Springstead or Baker Tilly this time?
Yes, definitely. Every consultant that does compensation studies uses a different math for the scores, right? So there's not a right and wrong answer as long as you're measuring the right criteria. So they're all measuring the same criteria, right? It's just how do they get to the number. Our ABDO methodology might score a position at 250 points, where SAFES might end up, it tends to be a little more condensed than ours, so they might come in at 225. Those positions are still going to be sort of, they'll still be positioned within the organization in the same way, in theory, right? So the score doesn't mean anything outside of the context of the city of Carver. You'd never compare your fire chief's score to a different city's fire chief score, because they don't mean anything independent of the rest of the city scores. So there would be some adjustments if
Kind of a editorial comment. There's been some articles out there on this. The SAFE system, or kind of systems in general, there's a narrative out there that they're overvaluing college education, meaning that, the way to increase points for pay if you're trying to get a certain position is to increase that education, but what then you inadvertently do then is you shrink your pool, or maybe that position doesn't require a 4-year degree. So trying to find the right dynamic and system that meets the needs of an organization but is still equitable, I think is a process that we'll want to at least take on in this, so that we're not, it might make sense because a certain person has a bachelor's degree, and so you say you make it for that position, but then when that person leaves, do you really still need that bachelor's or master's degree? Or can you create value in that position by creating some other things that you're going to measure? And I think our existing system really values whether or not you have an associate's, bachelor's, or master's, and it's important, but I think it's overweighted in terms of the entire system.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. So the job descriptions and the associate and the scoring, which is based on the job descriptions, should reflect the minimum qualifications for a position. And you're never assigning a score to an individual. It's always to the position only. So you may have someone who's overqualified in a position with a bachelor's degree, but if you were to rehire, you may not need that, right? If they have qualified, or if they have other skills and experiences. And so that's correct. If it does, let's say, I'm trying to think of a position that let's say you're finance director, you want to be a CPA for whatever reason. Well, that's going to require a bachelor's degree because you can't get the licensure without the bachelor's degree. But you may have other positions where just because the incumbent has a certain degree, it doesn't mean it's required for the position indefinitely. And doing so does have a significant impact on score. Overstating education requirements is something we spend a lot of time working on.
You said what the state is measuring and looking at is just looked at singularly with the city of Carver. We're not being compared to other communities.
No. The way to sort of fail the pay equity test is to have male classes paid more than female classes that are similarly scored.
That's all they're looking at.
And that, as well as do male classes get to advance more quickly to the top of the scale? So if it takes female classes 7 years to get to the top of the scale and male classes to get 5 years to get to the top of the scale, for example, that will create issues as well.
And just for clarification, this study isn't to determine whether or not we're meeting pay equity standards. It'll be a product of it.
Yes.
But the city does annual reporting related to pay equity, so we know we're in compliance. We had an issue 10 years ago. But I think because the topics are so similar, it's easily to think about this as we're doing all this to make sure that we meet pay equity. Even though it's a byproduct of it, it's not the focus of the exercise.
No, but they're all sort of interrelated. The scores are related, and also part of the study is we'll confirm your pay equity today is compliant, and anything we might recommend, we're testing to make sure would be compliant if you adopted it. So, I mean, we're definitely making sure that wouldn't be an issue if you adopted whatever we recommended. So that's another big piece of it. The other really important component is to be able at the beginning of the study, before you know the sort of market results, to say, where does the city want to be positioned in terms of the market data? You're going to get a lot of information back about every position, about sort of, what is the minimum and the maximum. We measure 2 data points. We want to know the average minimum pay for a position and the average maximum pay, right? Not just the median. We want to know what the range is. That's important too. And so once you have that information, it shouldn't boss you around. I think a lot of cities feel like, well, if this is what it comes back, then we're going to have to do this or have to. You can pick based on your compensation philosophy, where are you aiming for in that market range, right? There's average, which is the 50%, but some cities, for whatever reason, will elect to position themselves somewhere above or below that average. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. You'll want to kind of be reasonably clear on what your ideal position would be even before you get the results. It's not that then you're locked into going there, but it's when we're looking at what is the cost to implement, understanding kind of what the ideal would be, and then figuring out if there's a way to get there somehow from a budget perspective. That's nice to know ahead of time before you get the actual market results. So just a comment there. And then with all of that in mind, then we build a compensation structure that sort of checks all those boxes for you, right? Your bargained employees will not be included in the compensation structure development, right? So they'll have job descriptions, they'll be scored, they'll have the market data, but they're collectively bargained, so we can't sort of recommend any compensation structure there. They'll have to stay where they're at until you go into negotiations, but you'll have good information as you go into those negotiations. And then one of the other, I think, really nice things, particularly for a growing city, is if you like, at the end of the study, we can help you put together a position classification review policy. So, for example, an employee says, my job has changed a lot, and I need to look at my score again. I don't think my score is right anymore. So it kind of outlines like what might change the score, how frequently can they request those things, that sort of thing.
And just a nice feature of this, our previous system, we were kind of locked into Springstead or Baker Tilly, so anytime we wanted to do that, we had to, contract with them to do that service. The goal here is to have Abdo do the front end, but a kind of a train as you go, where Leah would lead a team of our folks to do that, learn to do that process, so that we can be nimble enough to respond to an employee's concern about their classification without going through a complex process through a third party to get that answer for them.
Yep.
Leah, I have a question, but I'll wait till you're done with this slide.
I think I am.
Okay.
Go ahead.
On the second to last bullet point where it says, and that I've been hearing that word scoring a lot, that this will establish, and then at the end there's a scoring review processes. Is that for your firm or for the department heads here? Like
Who would do that? That's a great question.
or is that the score for going back to kind of the pay equity?
Yes.
Or is it the score for an employee's performance?
That would be, that's a great question. It's the score for pay equity. It's the position score that then sort of factors into where do they land in the grade ranges and in the comp structure, right? And for pay equity. And ideally, long-term, we used to have clients contract with us, just like SAFEs. If they had updates, they'd send them to us and we'd score it because the math is kind of proprietary. Cities need to be more nimble than that. And so we've really sort of taken the approach in the last year that we train. So you'd want to have one or two people trained in the scoring. It's one of those things that is better to keep fairly centralized so that you don't have sort of people going rogue on scores and department heads. Typically, I wouldn't recommend having your department heads score their own people. You'd want that pretty centralized, but
Thank you.
for consistency, yeah. Yep, great questions. All right, next slide. So this year, because there was no 2023 LMC salary survey, we've been using 2022 data that we age as well as doing direct surveys to cities. The league just released their and launched their survey. So when you're rolling into 2024, you will have good league data. So that's usually the primary source. Not every city responds to that data. So any cities that you have in your established comparable list that I know you're talking about tonight, if they for whatever reason haven't responded to the league data, then we'll solicit that information directly from them. And sometimes it just takes a little nudging from your city leadership, and if they don't send it to us right away, usually Brent can call in a favor and they'll send it. So we really kind of do as much as we can to get the information you need in. But the league is a great source. We also have access to Economic Research Institute data for any positions that you think might be reasonably comparable to private sector positions. So think cities that have municipal liquor stores, like bartenders, waitresses, those types of things, some accounting positions at times. Electric utilities is a big one that typically gets compared to the private sector. So those are we have that data as well. And ERI is one of the most well-recognized private sector wage databases in the country. So here's what can you expect, what can't you expect? When we're going out to market, you have a job description, but we do not get to see the job descriptions for every position we're comparing to. At most, we get one or two sentences that give a brief summary of the position and a title. Now in cities, there's some consensus of like, well, if you're a public works director in a similar sized city, the job is probably pretty similar to a public works director or superintendent in another similarly sized city. So we do our best based on what we know to match those up. But I think it is important, you know, if you have a job that like maybe wears lots of hats, we might, if they're HR and IT and, I don't know, pick a couple things, we may match it up and average out a couple different positions to try to get that blend, but we never get to set the job description side by side. So just keep that in mind. Any questions on that? Sometimes that can trip people up a little bit. Okay, so just keeping that in mind. And then again, we look at the range, not just the midpoint. So you want to know, well, what's the average pay, but also how does that relate to the minimum and the maximum? So, all right, next slide. I'm chewing up, oh gosh, you guys, I'm sorry. This gives you just a little bit of idea of like what are we measuring when we're doing the scores. I won't go through all of this, but what's maybe more important to note on here is what the score doesn't factor in. It doesn't matter the quantity of duties on the job description. So there's no incentive for employees to just like send us a 10-page job description. Quantity doesn't sort of add up in the numbers. Temporary position assignments, so if they're the backup for someone or they fill in for someone while they're out on leave or something like that, unless those are longer term, that one to impact scoring. And then we did talk a little bit about it's never the individual, it's the position. So we're never looking at the person in the job, we're looking at the job and the duties required by the city. So those are the 4 key areas. We do factor in positions that may be exposed to certain physical demands, environmental hazards, those types of things as well. Questions on the scoring? This is an area that we also really involve your department heads in, because if there's not some sort of general consensus and comfort level with the scoring, the whole study can be challenging for them to sort of stand behind later on. So we get them involved mid-project and make sure that we haven't missed anything and that they feel at least comfortable with how we got the numbers. So,
can I ask a question? Under the problem solving, that one isn't quite as concrete there when we're talking about context and precedents and things. Can you just dive a little bit into that?
In that area, we're talking about what is the complexity and types of problems the position is tasked with solving. So the context and precedent is there an established, is it like a true or false test or a multiple choice test where they know when I encounter this project or this problem, I'm either going to do A or B or A, B, C, or D, right? Because there's some sort of established precedent there. Or is it a position where it's like an essay question. It's high enough up in the organization that the problems oftentimes haven't been encountered before, and they're having to sort of take what they know from other things and come to an answer. And then again, just the sort of complexity of problems is another thing that's kind of factored in there. Are they the level and impact of the problems encountered? Great question. All right. Next slide. I think we're almost done. And then it just goes through the project phases. So this gives you just a little idea of timeline. I think you got these ahead of time, so I won't go through this. But when we talked about the benefits of the study, you can see kind of all these things ticked off in the timeline. Typically, to do a good job for a city your size, this is running about 100 to 120 days to project completion. All right.
Just to add on to that, so before the council signs off on this, we'll bring this to a future council meeting for the proposal, but we're thinking tentatively of a kind of a later fall, start with the position description function and the classification piece of this, so that we can get a running start on the compensation and data collection part in 2024, with the end goal being that by late winter, early spring, you can have the results and have plenty of space to think about, discern, etc., where you want to be on pay, so that it doesn't feel condensed as it relates to what would be the 2025 budget. So anything that you would decide wouldn't impact the 2024 budget. That's what you'll be working on or are working on now. But what this would inform your decision-making process for 2025. So that's kind of the rough outlines of the schedule that we were thinking would work best for the council.
And the study itself is written into this year's budget, or it would be next year's?
Well, it's proposed to be written into 24's budget. But we'd be asking the council for approval to get going in 23, the tail end of 23.
Got it, okay.
All right, maybe next slide, and I think this could be it. Can go one more. All right.
I do have a question. So in your documents, it says regulatory review for 25 positions. Are we going to be looking, we don't have 25 positions, I don't think, in the city right now, because I know in public services we have a lot of Tech 1, Tech 2, and I would imagine that those are all going to be done as one role. Are we going to be looking?
No, they're done individually.
So if we have 3 Tech 1s, they'll be done individually?
No, I mean, Tech 1, Tech 2, and
Okay.
Tech 3 are separate.
Okay, but I meant, like, we might have 3 Tech 1s, or there are multiple.
Correct.
So are we gonna be looking at the positions that we're looking to hire in the future, or are we just doing?
We haven't narrowed in on that. We're also going to be looking at trying to establish some part-time positions.
Okay.
And their classifications, just to make sure that, we don't have kind of this, like our seasonals or some of our other part-time positions, that to make sure that our position descriptions are uniform and follow that kind of same process for review, even though they might fall differently within the schedule. Am I hitting all the right notes with that?
Yeah, they may not go in your regular compensation structure, but having the job descriptions in place and knowing kind of what that range is can be nice.
Okay, so we will be pretty close to 25 positions.
As we get closer, Leah and I talked about just kind of narrowing in that scope. We were just kind of, it's, the more, if we add more positions beyond that 25, then the cost would go up.
Okay, and then is the fire department included in this?
We,
Review there?
I didn't go through the list, we just had the number of positions, so I don't know if it was included or not.
I'm starting out kind of big picture, but maybe a couple of the fire chief and deputy chief, but I think once we do a complete tally, but that'd be like the long-term goal, just the matters on kind of where we end up finishing up on scope, but I think clarity on expectations is usually a pretty critical key to success, and so having that uniform position description, I think, puts us in a really good position. And right now we're in a position where we have probably half a dozen different formats of position descriptions right now. So just having that, because we used, 10 years ago we had position descriptions that functioned more like a task list, like pick up the mail, answer the phone. And so kind of correcting all those issues and making things uniform, I think, puts us in a better position. So, we'll probably err more on the side of being aggressive with trying to get this done rather than having like this one piece, as long as we can control, our budget on this. But
Thank you.
I will say too, my experience is when cities try to narrow the position count down too low, they end up adding on additional positions that are sort of tentative anyway, because you get to the end of the study and say, well, if I don't have that, it's like 3 months from now I'll have that, so I need to include it in the study. So I think you're probably wise to start wider, and we can narrow it down a little bit, as opposed to getting an unexpected change order because you add 4 or 5 more positions at the last minute. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yes.
Yeah, so the annual market study updates, how comprehensive are those, and do they extend the useful life of the entire study?
that's a great question. So the stated price in the proposal for the annual market study update would be for us to completely redo that market study component of that phase of the project. So it would include pulling the positions, matching them with the League of Minnesota Cities, pulling direct surveys for cities that hadn't responded to the league survey, and then again doing that recalibration of where are you currently positioned relative to the market and where would you like to go. So it's not a full comp study, but it sort of does recalibrate that market position. And you can do that as some cities want it done every year. Some cities do it themselves every other year and have a consultant do it every 2 or 3 years. It kind of depends on the last few years. I think cities are feeling like they need it more frequently than they have in the past.
And we're actually, I think, on the leading edge of that. So the city council for over 5 years or more has adjusted the scale annually by the Minneapolis Federal Reserve's inflation number. And so even in some, like in 2022, I think it was 8% or something like that. And so that's on the agenda for tonight at 6%. And there are some communities, as you know, that they do the compensation study and then they leave it alone. And then those minimums and maximums don't move, and then they do the compensation study, and then we're talking about 20%, like
Big changes.
changes. And so like there has been a kind of a method to like trying to avoid that in a community, especially of our size, to like manage that. So hopefully that bears some fruit here in this next study.
Yes. Yeah. So to your question of does it help maintain the integrity of the compensation structure the more frequently you do it? Yes. Because not only will it help keep your ranges in line with market, but it also does, like, if something really changes with the position, that will sometimes bubble up in a market study, and you can say, well, gosh, this position seems to be way overpaid or way underpaid, and why is that? You know, it used to fit in the grade that it was at, and it was reasonably, you know, the wage was reasonable, and now it's not. And you can, it creates questions that I think help you maintain the integrity longer for the comp study without having to do a full redo.
An example of that would be like there is just a shortage of building officials, especially throughout the metro area, and so you might find that the pay for that has changed dramatically, where you can find a city manager probably anywhere. So,
We're not looking.
but I mean that is an example of just for whatever reason through retirements or attrition or what have you. It's really, I mean, we're really fortunate to have 2 really great building officials, but people are constantly looking for that position. So you might see kind of a outlier in that, and then managing that within the entire system.
Any other questions from you, Eric?
No, not.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
I'll hang out in the back for a little bit.
Sure, thank you.
All right, moving on, the Peer City Cohort Review. Mr. Merrick.
I'm just gonna fire this up here. All right. I'm gonna change my view here. So this is kind of good timing, I think, to talk about this with Leah's presentation and talk about the classification and compensation study and the review of Peer City cohorts or review of that cohort. And one of the things that really stuck with me from Leah's presentation that I think it would be good for the council to remember is whatever data that you get from these peer cities, it doesn't boss you around, meaning that it's the data that you can reflect on and determine on your own how you're going to use that to inform your own policy decisions or whatever decision you're looking at making with rates, charges, tax rates, employee pay, etc. And so really the question is, do these cities that we're proposing as a staff, do they get the information that you'd want to help you make a decision, not necessarily that whatever the average is of these cities is going to compel you to make a decision on what that average is. And so just a little bit of background. We've traditionally used 9 peer cities as that resource. We've collected everything from tax rates to a number of years ago, we looked at franchise fees and used those peer cities to review kind of how Carver compared with our market. The city council recently identified a need to review that. Doesn't mean you necessarily need to make any changes, but we wanted to review that as a part of our strategic initiative. You'll notice in the following slide, we're proposing to remove Medina and Minnetrista and Rockford to replace with Albertville and Corcoran, so net loss of 1 peer city. Editorial comment, we believe that Medina and Minnetrista have some unique tax base characteristics, just being lake communities, and I think that that's somewhat not in alignment with Carver, and then Rockford, just kind of due to their size and growth trends. We feel like Albertville and Corcoran are more proportionately aligned with our peer group based on their size, growth, and development trends. So we've kind of given you a little mini data dump on some things that might be of interest to you. For example, miles to Minneapolis, their population, and their 2023 city tax rate. And then you can see some estimates. And again, I think another good point that Leah had made is, not maybe necessarily connecting with where we are today, but where we're going to be and how you want to align yourself with that kind of future state. And so there are some cities that aren't going to grow as fast as Carver. And, I think when we talked about that, understanding that we're going to be, there's no reason not to think that we're going to be 10,000 plus by the end of the decade, which is getting closer and closer as we go by. So what does that mean for that peer city review? Again, really focusing on draft for discussion. This doesn't need to be like, yes or no on this. If you want other cities looked at and other variables considered as it relates to expenditures or budget characteristics, we can certainly gather that for you. But just wanting to kind of initiate a discussion on this topic. So happy to answer any questions.
I have one. Go ahead. When we've had Waconia in for quite a while, but when we're looking at kind of the range in the population, they're double what we are. So help me understand why that, although, our neighbor, neighbors to us, but why is that a good peer city for us, being that they're double our population right now?
Editorial comment?
I'm just looking for a little background, so it helps me, because the other ones kind of range around where we're at, a little higher, a little lower, but this one is technically the lowest one on there.
I would say that, based on our collective staff experiences, that the council and the community kind of tends to punch a little bit out of its weight class as far as higher. We're not compared, and I struggle with this, we're not compared to, we're not losing employees to Elko New Market. No one's talking to the city about what the tax rate is in Delano. We're being compared to Chaska. We're being compared to Shakopee, Chanhassen, Prior Lake, Savage, etc. And so it's a great question. We had other drafts of this where we had Hopkins and Rogers in here, because I think that's where the mood of the community is, at least from my perspective of we want that little bit of a stretch goal. And so it all depends on what type of information you're looking at. And by tax rate, I would say we're relatively the same. We're probably, if you look at it in terms of where we're at in kind of stage of life, Waconia is already got their first job. We're probably just looking to get into college, but we're a similar city to Waconia. They're just probably a decade in front of us as far as growth. And so following them, and again, they'll be the high side, right? And you have Elko New Market on the low side, but a lot of this, and that's why I started editorial, is based on where you're at and what you want those boundaries to be. But this is about as opinion-based as you can get. And so for me, this is what the council wants to see for information. I can tell you, why we included Waconia like I did, or Dayton or Delano, etc. But it really is personal to the 5 of you on what kind of information you want and how you want that to be constructed. And if you want, to take out Waconia because you think they're not a comparison, they wouldn't be helpful to you in your decision-making process, then that's what we would do. But I wouldn't say that we're, when we did a continuous kind of email conversation on this, and I sent about 10 drafts to Leah. She probably thought I was psycho or something on it. But
Welcome to the next few months.
it's not, there's just no right answer. And so
Right.
I can tell you kind of what we were thinking, but it's not like talking about a setback where it's 5 feet and that's what we have. It's more arbitrary, so.
Is that
guess here's-
Laconia, the community, though, over the last couple of years, we've kind of leapfrogged them in tax rate as far as peer cities in Carver County? They were lower,
Yeah, it's
we
good,
were
but it's
lower.
been going kind of back and
Yeah.
forth, but we've been closely aligned with them. But, I mean, they have way more commercial tax base than we do. They have the hospital and a high school right in the city, and so there's
And a lake.
a lake. I mean, there are,
We have a river.
and you could also make, I struggle with this, is like, Delano and Albertville are not metro cities by like definition. They're not within the Met Council. They don't deal with a lot of the same issues that we do. There are some cities in here that have their own police departments we contract, and so, Delano has a municipal electric and liquor store. So we've said this over and over, but every city has their own story. And so what 7 or 8 cities' stories do you want included to help you figure out where you want Carver to be?
I guess here's my recommendation is I don't know these cities very well, like you just editorialized. I think what would be helpful for me, and I think for future council, is, sorry to ask for this, but like a detailed spreadsheet. So if you've got cities, and here's your criteria, whatever you said, because you said, size, growth, right, what their past growth has been, what their potential growth is going to be, what their how much commercial do they have, how close are they to certain corridors, other aspects, attributes that you think, because I think that would be helpful to kind of understand how you rank these other cities so we can understand why we're choosing these versus others, right? I would include on that list, cities like Chaska, Chanhassen, Shakopee, so we can say, here's why we don't include them, right? I guess I would like a bigger picture clarity on kind of what are the criteria that the staff has looked at that you think, is meaningful, and then, we can kind of say, does that criteria make sense? I mean, I think we tend to look at this list. I like that you point out, we look at this list to say these are our peers, right? You call this the peer city. But I like that you also pointed out we might want to have cities on there that we aspire to be like. They may not be our peers, right? But they're maybe who we might want to consider being like. And so it's good to have that data in front of us as we make decisions.
Yeah, if you list that, to like totally unvarnished, like I had Chaska in here for a long time, but I thought the council might have a real problem with that but I also would say like times 10 is we were compared to Chaska.
Of course.
And so should we just again, the 5 of you are making decisions, but should we just understand what Chaska's doing?
Yes, so let's put those that we don't necessarily want to put on the peer, but let's have them on a list to say, here's why we don't include them, right? It's because of this criteria that we don't think is comparable.
So it's just a matter of like if you want to tell me what criteria you want, then we can prepare that data, and then you can determine however many. And 8's not the magic number. You could have 5 cities. You could have 3. But how do you want to use this information?
And because I think it's going to evolve, like you said, right, over time.
Troy, I see what you're saying about like city to aspire to be, but I'm a little uneasy about comparing us to Chaska, Shakopee, Eden Prairie.
I am too, but I would like to see a list with that criteria to say, here's why we don't include them, right? So we can answer that criteria. I'm not saying that they should be on the peer city list. I think we should have a list of cities, understand criteria, and say, we're pulling these 8 out.
In my mind, that's an easier answer than requires a spreadsheet for. It's because they are, so I will
But I don't-
oftentimes get the question of, why is my water bill so high? I moved here from Eden
Right.
Prairie.
Right.
I stole this from Brent, but he's got a really good, like, templated, what's become my templated response of Eden Prairie's population is
Right, but so
45,000 or
I
whatever
don't
it is.
have that
They
information.
were 7,000 in 1971.
I guess I'm asking for, I need that information. I guess I would like a list of cities that we've included or nearby cities, right? And say, what's their population? What's their tax rate? And the criteria about growth, right? I don't think Eden Prairie is growing percentage-wise as fast as Carver is, right? Some of those things that you mention in bullet number 6 about why you chose to add Albertville and Corcoran. Corcoran, I don't know those cities and what their population is or their growth. I don't know them very well. And I think that that's helpful education to me as a city council member so I can answer those kinds of questions.
So when
I
you're,
have some,
I was just gonna say, I'm just, want to go with, what Joy was saying. So, I mean, when you say spreadsheet, does it need to be that in-depth, or are we just talking like some bullet points just for some
Some bullet
extra
points,
information?
take 4 criteria and
Sure.
say, here's
Yep.
the information about, and
Yep.
then we can say, this is why we don't include Eden
Yep.
Prairie. It's why we don't compare ourselves to Chaska.
Yeah.
But this
And
is
is
why
why
we
we
should
do.
add Albertville, because
Right.
yeah, they're really like us in these ways.
I think that's good because I saw Albertville on here, and I knew there was certainly a good reason that we looked at it, but I didn't know what it was. I know
why.
Corcoran a little bit better, so that one made
Yeah.
immediate sense to me.
I just
but-
don't know. So
Yeah.
it's just from education perspective, right? And it's not just for me, it's for future, because I think this list is going to evolve over time.
I have some feedback, and then just some feedback. Is I agree with Councilmember McKnight. It would be nice to have it like as a reference material. That's maybe a larger list of neighboring cities, and then maybe some of the columns would be like those that have franchise fees. How many that to me would be important. And then the other one, and maybe it's really not, or if it's really hard to measure, then not worth it. Like the number of miles that they plow, or like how many acres the city limits is. Because when I saw Waconia, I actually think of Waconia as a peer city cohort, but I realize they have a bigger population, but they also have a really big, city limits, I think, but I don't have the exact numbers. So it would just be nice to have more like reference points.
Besides the
Yeah.
population.
But and this is also like one of my favorite topics, the peer city cohort. When I first started council, I remember we would see things similar to this, or I would ask like, well, what does, this city, what do they do? Or like, how much does it cost here? What do they charge for that? And then June of 2022, like it was such a good seminar, I still remember, but it was at League of Minnesota Cities Convention. They had a session on just like, every city has a story to tell, but like much more about like, lean on what makes your city unique and the character of it. And I think we really do a lot of that with our river and also just the initiatives we have there. So it's such different things. There's kind of the character of our city, but then as a council member, when I'm asked to make decisions, it helps me to be able to see kind of what the neighboring cities do. Then also to see, okay, this is why we don't do, or this is why we don't have X, Y, Z, or this is why it's not that cost. And then to be able to have a narrow list that's just the peer city cohorts. And I'm fine with the 9 that are presented. For me, it's interesting when I see Albertville, I always think it's St. Michael Albertville, but that's maybe because of a
High
friend who
school.
goes to school there, so
It's a school district, I think.
school district more. So, just a little more context on just neighboring cities, and then being able to just compare ourselves when we feel like we need to look at different things, more like data points to see.
And for me, I don't want to go overboard on the data points. I don't want to make a lot of busy work.
No.
But I think there are a few important ones that we can
Yeah.
have in the background here that will help us understand why we have these ones, why
Yeah.
those ones.
And those are
Thanks
the
for
only
saying
3
that.
I could think of.
That's my hesitancy. I worry about this taking 3 days worth of staff time to pull together, because what are we truly gonna need miles of streets plowed for?
That I wasn't sure that, and that's why I had said too,
So
if it's
Whether
worth it.
Some of it was
population
But I
is
was
better
just trying to
proxy
like,
for size.
on the
Yeah.
spot, think of things beyond just franchise fees and the number of acres within the city limits.
But, and so,
Oh.
again, like, not to
Yep.
pick every
I know why
argument,
now.
but like,
This
we
winter-
don't need, we decided against franchise fees. Why do we
Right.
care if they have franchise franchise fees?
because it could come up every 2 to 4 years.
Why wouldn't we just examine it if we were to reevaluate franchise fees? I
Yeah,
don't
so
mean
that's
to,
maybe not a good one.
like, pick
And the
apart
only
every
thing,
single
like
one
the
of yours.
miles, plowable miles popped in my mind, I was thinking like, okay, this winter when we were, looking at, what do we need for the plow truck, or when is it gonna be ready? Like, that was just helpful that was the first time that I probably was concerned about how many miles we plow, and then that just helped give it some context, like, are we putting our resources in the right places? And if there's here that we can learn from, that's just all I would use it for.
I think Eric has his hand
Yeah.
up.
Oh, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, say, Brent, we're seeing a final product here after you've done a lot of deliberation over this. Do you have kind of the matrix you use to score those cities? You said you had Chaska on there, you took it off. Or do you need from council a specific set of, scoring categories that you want to evaluate? Keeping in mind, not trying to overwork you with 3 days of work, but I suspect you did a lot of this already.
Yeah, so I'm more of the qualitative, so like I go with my gut and think of the story. So I didn't do like probably shocks a lot of you, I didn't do like a scoring analysis on this. I kind of reviewed it, understood frankly, some of it was politics of like, and understanding the community dynamic. But, I was going to offer what I could do is add on to this list the cities that we contemplated that didn't make the list under these 3 categories. And if you had additional, if you wanted to have another couple of like other identifiable measures, we could add that. All this stuff I got from websites, city, county, et cetera. So if, my like selfish request is if you could limit it to like things that we could get from publicly without making a phone call and having another city get data for us. So like
Could we get,
estimated populations for 2030, we can
Sure.
get from the Met Council website through community profiles. That's a pretty easy one, but like the more intricate we get, the longer it will take. It doesn't like we're happy to. This is interesting work. It's important work. So don't feel like you're pushing us in an area that we don't want to go. But the only thing that gives me pause is like work that we would have to like call or engage the city to like prepare something for us, especially when we're going to be probably asking them for maybe compensation data. We don't want to use our favor card too early.
that's good guidance, Brent. I
Be
appreciate that.
city that's
Yeah.
so needy.
So I like the future look, right? If you get the 2030 growth data. Also, if we can kind of look back on their population, because their population, this is a snapshot in time, right? So I don't know if like 5 years ago, what their population was and the percentage growth, right, from today. That would say something,
Could we do?
I think, or
Could we
whatever.
do? Would it be too far back to go to 2010? Because then we could just pull census data.
Ah, okay. I see what you're saying, because we don't have 2020 census data.
Well, we could do 2020, but that only gives you
A couple years.
a 2. I mean, we could do that. We could do a 2-year snapshot.
That might be more relevant as we're thinking about current taxes.
Yeah.
So 2020 and 2030.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That gives some kind of,
And I can tell
gives
like,
the nuance there about growth and,
and like this as far as for expectation sharing. So we looked at Rogers, Hopkins, Matamidi, Lake Elmo, and Chaska. Am I missing any ones that those are the ones that we had on the list and then took off for a variety of different reasons.
I'm glad Chaska's not on there. I don't think we're comparable.
well, and I don't want to compare
Yeah.
it there, but I want us to say
Yeah.
why,
Yeah.
right?
But
I don't know
I can
anything.
put Chaska on there so you can see them.
Yeah. Always, I don't know. I don't want them to be a
so.
peer city, but
I
I
don't
want to have
think
the, I want to have the education.
We just put
Email
it
you
on
that.
the list.
Yeah, I'll email you the language from Brent's email, but I don't care for the Chaska comparison, and it's just me
I don't want
but I
it to
think-
be a pure city. I'm not saying
Right,
that.
right. I think, I don't have any issues with these cities. I think they're gonna be somewhat arbitrary regardless of who we pick. These seem like a fine group, and I think there's nothing that marries us to these 9 cities. At any point, we could say, hey, I was in Vadnais Heights over the weekend, and they seem to be, I wonder what they're doing for franchise fees, or, you know, like if the issue's relevant and comes up, or what their tax rate is gonna be next year, so.
I just was looking for more than 2 data points, miles from Minneapolis and population. I was looking for just 2 more data points, just to help me kind of see
My
why we
friend,
would choose them.
my friend Kevin Watson in Vadnais is going to be very touched that Vadnais came up in the council meeting. So
I really, truly just pulled that. But you give Kevin.
who
my
doesn't
best.
think of Vadnais Heights?
You
That's
give Kevin my best and
Yeah.
tell him we talked about him at 6:25 p.m. Let's see. Anything else from you, Mr. Pershman? I hear you shaking. I see you shaking your head. Okay. Anything else from you? Anyone up here?
No.
Nope.
Okay. I think we're good.
So I'll bring that
Yeah.
back to the next work session.
What you need from us?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Leah.
All right, moving right along, former County Road 40 Corridor Committee update. Ms. Smith.
Dan, I hear you clicking a lot, so I'm hoping you're pulling up slides.
I am,
Okay,
but
good.
you get to talk first.
Okay.
So let me bring it up.
Thank you,
As far
Mayor
as
and
time
Council.
check, no rush.
Yeah.
24 minutes, 23 minutes and 30 seconds.
I mean, we might as well get started, right?
Yeah,
Otherwise,
absolutely.
that's
Yep.
just dead time. Alrighty, so we, Dan and I are going to give an overview of the work that we did with residents, business owners on the former County Road 40 corridor. So we had a really engaged group of people. We met twice, which was really, I think, a testament to the work that we all did. We had 3 meetings planned, but we got the work done in 2 because there was consensus around the plans. So first of all, I just want to give a shout out to the group that met with us twice. They were a really fantastic group of residents. Sherry's in the room. It looks like Nate is on the Zoom call right now. So if you have questions for them specifically, I think we could invite them to be part of the conversation. So on the screen now were the committee members. We tried really hard to get a wide breadth of different people from the community. So we have a couple of residents that live on the corridor, a few business owners, especially at key intersections. So like Maggie from Casey's was there, Greg Cummins, who has Carver Insurance. That's one of the intersections we focused on. Nate was on there, Josh Isabel, Kara Hobbs for some business owners, and then some residents throughout the community. So not just people on the corridor, we had some residents from Meridian Fields, River Bluff Estates, et cetera. So it was great to get to know some different people that we typically don't see in this room with us. So it was a really good group that worked really hard in those 2 meetings. Slide. So this slide you've seen before at previous meetings when we started working on it. So the council tonight, we're going to review the information. We're not looking for you to make a decision. We're just looking to get some feedback about the plan that we came up with. So having shared language about what we know. So the first was we needed to develop a scope of work. Second is that the corridor is really significant. So it has some significant intersections, but also some significant implications. So things like trails, how can we plan for trails today that we can hit our strategic plan to think about trail connections? The Bluff neighborhood is something we hear about quite often that is not connected via trail to the downtown. So how can we include that in the scope of work? So having that range of different people from business owners to residents helped us develop what that scope of work looked like. The corridor, as we know, kind of cuts through our community. It's really interesting that it goes directly through our downtown, which I would say is not super common. It also has so many turns, which is tricky, calling it the former County Road 40. So
With an acronym.
we do, yeah. Something that can make it feel like our own, especially with the work that we did. And then we also have been doing a lot of work on streets, as we know. So projects like the JCP project, 6th Street, and then some of like the wayfinding and community building that we've been trying to do with our intersections, monumenting, wayfinding, bringing those into the corridor as well to make continue the vision and the idea that when you are on one of our corridors, it feels like Carver. You recognize some of our landmarks. We start to get that sense of place, sense of community. So those were some of the guidelines that we were working with this group through. Dan, do you want to get started on the objectives? I feel like you wrote these ones. Oh, Brent did. Okay, I'll take it over. So something that we know is important to this group and probably most people in the community is to think about parking. So we often hear that parking in downtown can get kind of tough if it's a busy night. So that was a principle that we explored through this process, is how can we keep the parking that we have, potentially add. We really avoided removing at all costs, just knowing that the downtown can get busy and that parking is important. Two areas that we really focused on, the two intersections, the one downtown, so where the public utilities Getaway Motor Cafe is, the intersection with Broadway, and then the intersection at Mountain Hope Road, which causes you to turn a little bit into an owl and turn your head most of the way around to get the full view. So thinking about safety at those intersections. We also heard a lot from Maggie at Casey's and Greg at Farmers Insurance, is that kids are often using that intersection and it doesn't inherently feel safe for pedestrians and especially kids zipping through there to get to Casey's. So we were really thoughtful about that intersection. So the two intersections were two areas of focus. You'll see that through Dan's presentation. Connecting the Bluffs neighborhood west of downtown along the corridor, so thinking through trail connections. There is the off-road trail, but that doesn't inherently lead itself to biking or safe travel during hunting season. So we thought really specifically about what that would look like, knowing that.
Flooding season.
Yes, absolutely. And being carried away by mosquitoes potentially.
Yes.
But the Bluffs it's a large neighborhood. We're going to continue development likely to the southwest. So how can we start connecting some of those neighborhoods through some major trail corridors? And then again, streetscaping. So the things that we inherently believe to be important in our projects in Carver. So limestone blocks, monumentation, adding the water tower where we can, street lighting, things that have started to develop our sense of place was another objective. Okay, now I'm ready. So this shows our schedule. So we had our first meeting May 17th, second June 28th. Here we're at the council update on July 17th. We had the task force meeting 3. This was just going to be an update meeting. So we were going to say this is the work we've done so far. We were planning to have a third meeting. But again, we came to a really quick, passionate consensus in 2 meetings, which was really fantastic. So we are looking to hold an open house. So the council's objective tonight is to discuss, give us some feedback, give us a head nod as if you're open to us bringing these ideas forward to the open house. So no formal decision is being asked of you tonight. You'll review, get some feedback from a few of the committee members, ask questions, and let us know if you're comfortable moving forward with that open house for fall of 2023. Go ahead. Okay, that was exactly the same thing. So I just said all of that. So Dan, I think you're up now.
Okay, well, I have the easy part here because you've already looked at the pictures. So at the end of the day, what we're really looking for is, are we in good shape to move this forward into some public discussion on what we came up with here. So of course you now have County Road 40. It is now a city corridor that you can do with as you wish, which means we really need to start asking some questions about what this is going to look like. It's pretty important from a lot of different angles on our end. If you're going to pursue funding, you have to know what you're going to build. And so that's what we're trying to sort out. There's a couple of key components of this corridor, so I'm going to focus in on 2 of them for the most part on this discussion. There's going to be a little bit of discussion on the trail to the west, but that's a pretty straightforward outcome as far as what we think is going to work. So there was a lot of discussion here at the intersection of Broadway here in the old 40 and of course near Casey's. And so that'll be the focus of our discussion here. So if you want to get oriented on the Broadway location here, take a good hard look at what is out there today, and then we're going to flip over to what we came up with. And really what we're doing here is asking some questions, getting a little bit of feedback from the group, and coming up with what we think is going to be the best fit given all circumstances surrounding this location. So this is what we came up with. So what we're trying to accomplish here is, of course, address some of the parking concerns in the area, increase the parking here. We think we can pick up 5+ stalls or stuff. There's parallel parking here, so it's a difficult estimation here because it's not fully utilized, and there's different assumptions for parallel parking. There's a little bit of subjectivity to how we want to estimate that out, but we're confident we'll be able to pick up a few stalls here, and this design isn't done yet, but it'd be a net positive. What we're doing at that, where you see the large patio on the east side of the intersection, is we're trying to make it more of a walkable intersection. As one of the goals of the group is to keep the walkability of this downtown location. It's not a overtly pedestrian-friendly intersection at this time. And so what we're really doing is tying the downtown to the future park. And you have to use a little bit of long-term visioning when you look at this, because this wouldn't necessarily make complete sense if the park wasn't there and the maintenance facility was still there. You have to look at this as a phased effort that you would build to over time. You could start with something as simple as the curb. So the big takeaway here is the one-way was a largely acceptable alternative here. There was a bit of back and forth discussion on that concept, and it was pretty widely supported. So with the conversion of the one-way on the east end here, it gave us a lot of flexibility here to go to the diagonal parking, create that walkable environment from the downtown to the park, and then really focus on the Broadway and Main Street intersection here for the vehicles. So the aesthetics all very wide open at this point. So I would defer a little bit on that to a later date. There's any number of ways this could be created aesthetically. There's going to be a lot of discussion towards the level of investment on the visuals here and colored pavements versus just concrete versus grass. That's all down the road. I think the big topics here is, would we be prepared to discuss a conversion to one-way, which is going to be the driving topic to County Road 40 as at least a transportation discussion. So the one-way is a big element to this, and then the rest of it is going to be created in time. Any questions or comments on this particular?
Can I just ask
design?
a property line question from
Sure.
this concept plan to the map before it? The property line that's by Lisa's place, if you look at the one that has actually this isn't the right map, but keep going, or back or forward one. There, if you
Yep.
if you zoom in on this one.
Let's see, I think where are we? Oh, that's the best I got.
Okay, can you zoom in on that? Or you can't do it on your.
Not easily, but
Okay, so what I'm seeing on this map when I zoom into it, though, is that the property line sits right behind the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then on the concept plan, it is showing the line that's going across on the bottom of the building
Mm-hmm.
is not. Is that where that's not where the current
It's
sidewalk line is?
property lines right here.
But
that light line.
That's not where the current sidewalk is. So what's?
Let's see where you're right here.
Yes. So when you look at the one map that
Here's
you can't blow up as easily, but I am blowing it up.
here's the sidewalk right down here. See that? So if you go back between the two, sidewalk right here, sidewalk down here. So that we're kind of matching under that current sidewalk alignment right there.
Okay, this one, the line is running directly against Lisa's Place building.
Yep, right there.
When you look at the other map, the line for the property is not up against that building, it is up against the sidewalk.
Okay, so your comment about whether or not that we've got the right of way.
You're right.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sorry, it's hard to point at my computer and have you see what I'm talking about.
I got you. I got you now.
Okay.
The answer to your question is this is GIS level property line. In order to actually, what that means is it's off.
Okay.
It's estimated, and it can be off by any number of feet, and so we would only call that an approximate line for the purpose of this study, and then anything in the future, it would have to be verified for the actual
And on the
survey
concept
accuracy.
plan, we can say that same thing because now the property line is running through the buildings on the right.
Yes. Yeah.
So we can say that this isn't actual, this is,
I would say it's not actual until it's actually survey accurate
Okay.
boundary with some boundary work. So no, it can move, and at this point, it's. I should disclaim that definitely not accurate.
okay, that, I was very confused, thank you for that.
Yes.
All right, feedback on County Road 40, Main Street and Broadway.
I like the one-way. I like that it adds the diagonal parking, especially adjacent to kind of this access to the trail and potentially that park downtown. I think it provides that traffic calming and makes the intersection less complex, right? Because the majority of the traffic is now going to be 3 ways instead of 4 ways,
Yep.
right? So I like that concept because I think what you're asking here is conceptually, do we like the direction that this is heading, right?
Absolutely.
Their direction.
Direction.
Absolutely, yep.
So I do like that.
Yeah. I have just 2 quick comments. I really like the one-way also. And I know this is very, the concept of it, and you had mentioned too, like, it's just the aesthetics. So even though that I like it already, gives the idea of the a planting bed and then tables and chairs, that must be number 9. I would like to see the table and chairs removed for now until, I just think that could be, sometimes somebody doesn't understand that it's just a concept. Like, it's a little too soon to visualize where everything would be.
Sure.
I'd rather just
I
see
agree.
the tables and chairs at what is gonna be our proposed splash pad park. Kinda like how you have the planting beds there. I'd rather just keep on the legend number 6 and 9 in that one quadrant.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I like that it appears it made sense too.
Yep.
Eric, thoughts?
Yeah, I really like the integration into the splash pad park. I'm all for the one-way, the increased parking with the diagonal parking. It is a concept plan, so I'm not so worried about potential placements of tables and chairs right now. But overall, yeah, I really like the concept and I support the one-way.
Thank you. Dan, okay, I'm gonna just go for this.
Yeah, I know, I said I just, when you're done.
Dan, on the north side of Main Street where the homes are, is that an added kind of bump out extension, or is that, at the corner it certainly is, but oh, no.
What is a little distorting about that image
Okay.
is right now it's a concrete apron from the sidewalks to the road, and now we changed it into an extension of the road, but we could just make that back to concrete. Really, the curb lines on both
Okay.
sides of the road are staying consistent,
Okay,
and how we put that back is still up in the air.
okay, great. I think my feedback is I love this. I think that I didn't, in my mind's eye, I think I had heard one way, but I love how the park kind of like literally and figuratively flows north. And it becomes really clear that it's a walkable intersection because, I mean, let's be honest, that will be the main thoroughfare between that and other businesses and other family-friendly places in our community. So I just see lots of children using that to cross, and that makes it so visually evident. I also love that we are gaining parking from this. So I think that this is terrific. Just one random thought to say it, and I know we already kind of ideally have a plan, but I think when folks see this, I just talked to my friends at Carver Crossing last week, and I know they love their community gardens. I know this community really loves our community gardens, so I think we need to be ready to explain where those are going to go when we share this concept plan. So go ahead.
Okay, I want to talk about some of the functionality here. If we're looking at where the corner is by Greg Witt's building, is that bump out allow us enough space to have that stop sign? If we were to want to make this a 4-way stop? Is that out in the sight line?
Yeah, we would make this a 4-way is how we're looking at it.
Okay.
And
But it'd
yes.
be a 3-way, right?
Well,
technical?
yeah.
Well,
to be-
if diagonal
to
parking
be
happens,
technical,
we're not quite
I'll
there.
say all way directions.
But we can
Directional
have
stop, yeah.
you can visually see a stop sign from that bump out.
Yeah, we're a little different than the county in which we would use a little bit softer standards. So yes,
Okay.
yes, it's going to be visual sufficient for this speed of a corridor. They might look at it as 30 miles an hour. we're going to look at it and say this is going to be a 20 miles per hour approach.
So the answer is yes, Dan.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
That was a good question. I'm glad you asked that
because
one.
because it's a city roadway. The answer is I would decide that.
Okay. I'm really supportive of something happening in this area, especially that extra stop sign. It's really dangerous if you're crossing the road there. So I'm happy to see that bump out helps out. I think the patio space next to the getaway seems to make good sense. I hope that Nate feels the same way as I'm talking about his space here, but he was on the committee, so I believe that he probably is. When we are putting this rendering out, though, to the public, when I'm looking at the number 6 and 9 there, where you're basically on what could be someone else's property, to show that you've paved that in and put these, I think that's a little presumptuous on our part to say that we want it to look like this when the business owner had nothing to do. I think this could.
Number 6?
Oh, maybe not 9, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, number 6
Yeah.
is on the south side.
Oh, sorry, yep,
Yeah,
9.
Okay.
I just think that as council and is putting this forward, I don't want to look presumptuous that we are scooping up something that isn't ours.
Yep, it's a very, very fair comment, and I think what we do is, for open house purposes, we'd probably disclaim with some notes and say these are in cooperation with property owners. That's the type of thing that we could kind of put on there, pull that back. I think.
I'd like to see it actually grayed out a little bit, so it
grade.
doesn't look so, this is where we're
Well,
at.
what
Yep.
we can do is just put it
Absolutely.
to its existing condition of grass and sidewalk.
I think that might be best, because it could always happen later, but I don't want to becoming, like I said, being presumptuous that something that doesn't belong to us.
Does that
Yep.
mean that from our sidewalk cafe ordinance perspective, Getaway Motor Cafe and Lisa's could comply with this design? Is that what we're trying to say by putting tables and chairs there?
I don't know if we've gone that deep.
Okay.
To be honest with you, this patio space, we're assuming the property owners that have
Would
nearby
want it.
patios would want sidewalk
Yeah.
up to their buildings. So that's an assumption that is correctly, pulled back to suggest that it's not a public need. It's a discussion topic with property owners, and that's a very different angle here.
Okay.
So I'd like to see what it looks like turn back to it, but if we have to even gray it out, I think it should have a note or something. I don't like that at all. I don't think it's gonna be received
We'll
as
just
well.
put it
I agree.
to green and sidewalk.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll take care of it for the public purpose needs. So.
Okay. When I'm looking at the one-way, it's interesting. It took me a minute to figure out what I thought about it. No, but we have homes here and we have a business entrance in the back also. And I do have a little bit of concern with block-long one-ways. And I say this from experience. My dining room window looks out to the one block one-way that we have here by Harvey's. And all day long, I see people driving the wrong direction. All day. So it concerns me just a little bit. I think if we are to go with a one-way here, when I'm looking at the width of that, I'm trying to think about vehicles, trucks, things that have to come into the back of a business at Lisa's place. So I want us to be mindful of what capacity that width is going to be able to hold to get some bigger trucks back there to unload.
Absolutely. That's one of the key questions. We need to find out the size of their delivery trucks. We'll run turning movements. Those are things that'll definitely refine the design, and that'll be a functional redesign. So.
Okay. Like I said, I'm not overly sold on the one-way. I think it can create some issues as well. Once we get past where it's showing one-way on here, I'm going to use names maybe in front of Lenson's house, the first house past Church by the River. So now we've got a couple of houses on that side, and then on the other side, what does that mean for on-street parking there? Because I know we often have there's events, but just even in life that they have guests and others who come and use that as parking.
We are planning on keeping it, and I would probably stripe it to make it a little bit more orderly. But we are planning on keeping it on that side because we have the width.
Okay, so there would be parking available.
There will be, but they're gonna get it from the other direction. It's gonna be parking to the left side as opposed to coming from the right as they currently do. So So you're going to be pulling down the one way and pull off to the left to get your parallel parking.
Nope, I'm talking down farther, sorry, on the south side of the road here.
Oh, you're talking about,
Yep.
down here
Yes.
on the south side. Yeah, no, that, we would be able to reestablish a parallel somewhere in here, but that requires some additional design refinement. Those are one of the things that we would talk about at the open house.
Okay,
And I would say it's a very fair question and one that has to be thought out a little bit more.
okay, because when we're talking about, we're making more parking, we also do have to be, recognize that there are homes here.
Yep.
And we run into problems on some other streets in Carver who don't have on-street parking. 6th Street is one of them where it's a little wonky with now the new bike trail and people trying to park and things like that. So I want to just keep that in mind that, especially some of these older homes who maybe don't have the 3-stall driveway that,
Oh, yeah.
brand new ones might have, that we look at having parallel parking down past that intersection.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one of the things that we're anxious to get for feedback at the open house. So, yeah,
I
it's
don't mean to
very
rush
fair.
you, but
Yep.
I'm watching the time.
We're there, yep.
Now we have a shiny new clock. So, are you good on providing feedback on this one? Okay. So what I hear is the majority is saying thumbs up.
Yeah.
We like this.
We like it.
Go ahead
Proceed
and
to open
take
house.
it to an open house.
Okay.
Yep.
With that, Dan, I'm going to ask you if it's okay if we put a pin in this, as they say, and talk about it after 7 o'clock.
I'm at the next meeting too, so.
Perfect. I'm sorry. How would you like to do a twofer, a doubleheader tonight? That's all right. Okay. I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
A motion by Councilmember Mock and a second by Councilmember McKnight. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Mayor Johnson, do we need to do a roll call?
Oh,
Gosh. Okay.
Go ahead.
I'll do Councilmember Pershman, Councilmember Mock,
Aye.
Councilmember Sayer,
Aye.
Councilmember McKnight,
Aye.
and Mayor Johnson.
Aye. All right. Motion passes 5-0. The meeting is adjourned. We'll see you in a few minutes.